If you don't own the data, someone else will, and you'll lose out. Or the alternative title could be, why the hell are we still building homes like we were building cars in the 1980s? Imagine owning a car, but having no idea how it's performing until it breaks down. That's exactly where we are with housing today. By the end of this video, I'll show you why this mindset is costing us and how we can fix it. I recently had a conversation with a developer about integrating environmental sensors into their buildings. We talked about data, particularly from sensors that monitor things like air quality, humidity, energy performance, that kind of stuff, and how it could transform not only how buildings are used, but also how they are maintained and improved over time. My point to them was simple. If you don't integrate sensors during construction, a point at which it's never going to be cheaper to do it, I might add, someone downstream, whether that's an aftermarket company, a tenant, or a maintenance contractor, are going to add them later on. And when that happens, the developer loses access to the data, and along with it, the opportunity to innovate or improve their future developments. This is more than just a hypothetical. We are already seeing companies specialising in retrofitting sensors into existing buildings to serve housing associations and individual homeowners, for example. These companies end up owning the data and providing insights to landlords and occupants. Developers who could have collected this data from day one are now effectively cut out of the loop entirely. The results? They lose the chance to make data-driven improvements, streamline maintenance, or even optimize the user experience of their buildings. In an era where data is one of the most valuable resources, that's a significant missed opportunity. When my daughter started to learn to drive, it triggered one of those nostalgic conversations about my first car, which, as you can imagine, she was only too delighted to sit there and listen to. I told her about back in the day, maintaining a car was almost a rite of passage. You had to understand things like points gaps and distributor caps and spark plugs. I remember spending hours of the weekend with a toolbox tweaking the engine to keep it running smoothly. Her reaction, other than disgust that I was still talking about cars, was pure shock. Her concept of a car is that it's something that you give to a mechanic to plug into some kind of computer to tell you what's wrong with it, and probably get your old man to pay for, I should say. This is the modern reality. Today, most cars come with onboard computers and diagnostic systems. If something goes wrong, a light on the dashboard comes on, or in the case of more advanced cars, they might even send information to your phone. The mechanic doesn't tinker under the hood. They plug in a laptop and read the detailed diagnostic report. My daughter will never have to learn what a points gap is, other than when I'm forcing it on her. And that's a good thing. It's a generational leap that's made cars safer and easier to maintain and more efficient. So why hasn't housing made this same leap? Consider what manufacturers like Tesla and BMW are doing with data. Tesla collects real-time performance data from its vehicles, monitoring everything from energy consumption to braking behaviour, and this data feeds directly into software updates that can optimise battery usage, improve safety features, and even add entire new functionalities to the vehicle. BMW, on the other hand, collects anonymised data about how drivers use their infotainment systems, climate controls, and driving modes. This allows them to refine future updates, adjust user interfaces, and default settings to better align with real-world usage. Now compare this to housing. Your average car costs what? Around £30,000? While your average home is what? 10 times that? Yet homes don't come with any of these feedback systems we take for granted with cars. We're still living in an era of distribution caps and warning lights. When it comes to buildings, most homes don't even have basic environmental monitoring, let alone the ability to tell you when systems like ventilation or insulation aren't working. For an asset as valuable and complex as a home, this lack of data is absurd. And this reminds me of my recent conversation with Tim Sharp on the podcast, an expert in building standards and things like indoor air quality. Tim pointed out that the construction industry rarely evaluates building performance after completion. In other words, homes are built based on assumptions, and developers often have no idea whether those assumptions hold true in real-world conditions. The result is a disconnect between design intent and actual performance, leading to issues like poor air quality, damp and energy efficiency, the performance gaps as we like to call it. Tim also highlighted how post-occupancy evaluations, essentially test drives for buildings, are almost non-existent in the industry. When they do happen, they're often limited in scope or treated as a one-off study or something like that. Imagine if car manufacturers adopted this same approach. The solution for me is clear. Integrate sensors during construction. Adding environmental monitoring at the point of construction is far cheaper and more cost-effective than retrofitting later. These sensors could track air quality, temperature, humidity, and energy use, and potentially even over time, interstitially within the building fabric, keeping an eye on things like insulation values, creating a continuous feedback loop that benefits the developers, maintenance teams, and ultimately occupants alike. As buildings become more complex and we demand higher standards for performance, better energy efficiency, healthier indoor environments, and lower carbon footprints, this is making decisions about buildings more and more complex. And doing this without data is just bonkers. It's like trying to drive a modern car without a fuel gauge or a speedometer. The data collected from these sensors could be used all the way down the chain, from developers fine-tuning designs to housing providers optimizing maintenance schedules and tenants making informed decisions about their homes. Owning this data isn't just a convenience, it's a competitive advantage. Developers who integrate sensors can use the data to refine future projects, ensuring better performance and higher customer satisfaction. Housing providers can reduce operational costs and improve tenant well-being, and occupants gain transparency and agency they need to live healthier, more comfortable lives. These lessons are simple. If you don't own the data, someone else will, and they'll reap the benefits. The technology exists today, it is already going in, and the cost of implementing is negligible compared to the value it brings. It's time, I think, for the housing industry to catch up with cars and start treating homes like the valuable assets they ultimately are.